Hello and welcome to another episode of the Agency Leadership Podcast. I'm Chip Griffin.
And I'm Gini Dietrich.
And Ginny, I really want to take a week off here, but, the show would not go on. So
That is true.
I
The show
can't do
would
it.
not go on without you.
Well, so maybe this isn't the best example for our conversation today. So what we're going to talk about today is a line that a friend of mine had in a LinkedIn post, and the rest of the post is not really relevant to the conversation, but as part of it, he had the line, "If an employee is too critical to take vacation, your problem isn't the employee." And that just really resonated with me because of the number of times that we have conversations with agency owners where they either say they have a team member they can't afford to have them take time off,
Yep.
or they need to really tightly regulate when they take time off, or the owner themselves feels like they can't take time off because the agency can't live without them. And I think that it really comes to the bigger point that we've talked about before, but no one person should be that critical to the operation that they can't step away for a week or even two and be completely disconnected. And if you can't do that, you need to look at how you are structured. You need to look at your processes and come up with a better plan.
Including the owner. You should be able to take a week or two off and not have everything come off the rails. As it turns out, clients are okay if you want to take time off. They're really okay. Not that big of a deal. So I totally agree with you. Like, there is not one person in that entire agency who can't take time off and have it hurt you. Now, if we're talking 6 months or a year, that's different. But a week or two should not be something that debilitates the entire business.
Yeah, and I think if you or a team member feels this way, like as if one person cannot take that kind of time off, then you need to dig into it more to figure out, is the belief at fault, right? In other words, it is the sense that you are so important, you are so critical that you can't step away. Because I'll tell you, often the case, that's
Sure.
not.
Yep.
Oftentimes, an owner takes a week off and they realize they missed all that much.
Yep.
And I always say, and they almost sound disappointed. I'm like, no, that's a victory.
That's great.
That is
Yes.
great that you can
Great.
just step away and things did
And
not
no
go
one
off the
misses
rails.
you. Yes.
If, on the
Great.
other hand, it is not a belief, if it is reality, if there is someone on your team, whether it's yourself or someone else, that cannot step away, that things really do grind to a halt, and it does impact your ability to serve clients, well, then you need to look at how you're resourced, how your processes are, and how you go about doing things. But that first critical piece is determining whether it's belief or reality.
Yeah. And I have a really good example of this that certainly hindsight is 2020 and I learned a great deal from it. But we had a social media director who managed social media for several clients and for us as well, for the agency. And she did a great job. She was really good at her job. What I discovered, though, is that she was hoarding all of the work to herself because she didn't believe that anybody could do it as well as she could, including me. And because of that, it was too stressful for her to take time off because she knew that she would have to do a whole bunch of social media in advance. She would still probably have to check while she was out because she hadn't empowered her team. And she had a team. She hadn't empowered them to do the work and to oversee it so that things could continue on with or without her. And after about a year and a half of her literally taking no time off, none, I said to her during a one-to-one, listen, you've got to take some time off. And I will never in a million years forget her reaction. I mean, she was offended. She was angry. She was like, I can't believe you're telling me to do this. And I was altruistic about it. I was like, you haven't had any time off in a year and a half. Like, take a week off. Go do something. Go hang out with your partner. Go play in Europe. Do something. And she was really angry with me. And I think she was in retrospect, I think she was angry because she didn't feel like I was supporting her in the way that she was doing her job. Fast forward to today, when I think about it, it probably did seem that way to her because I didn't realize she was hoarding all of the work. So when she ended up quitting, and when she left, I realized that that's what was happening. So when we replaced her, I had to ensure that the onboarding and the coaching and mentoring of that new director, social media director, was doing the work that we needed her to do, which was delegating and mentoring her team so that nothing came off the rails. And what you could miss, one person on the social media team could miss a week or take a week off or even 2 weeks off and be okay. So I think you have to kind of understand, is the employee hoarding all of the work? And because of that, doesn't feel like they can take time off? Or is it a cultural thing for the agency where you're so busy and all of these, there are lots of other issues going on, like you haven't priced correctly, and you're over servicing and all that. You have to figure out what the root of the problem is and fix that.
Yeah, I mean, and that's true of everything, right? The more you can get to the root cause, the better you can find an appropriate solution that actually works, as
Yep.
opposed to a band-aid that addresses it in the near term. And I like that you've identified some of the reasons why an employee might feel that way, whether it's because they truly are being overloaded or because they are a control freak micromanager type who just,
Yep.
wants to hoard all the work. I would add another into the mix, which is that some employees tie up their self-worth in the
Fair.
idea that they are
Yep.
indispensable, as a lot of
Fair.
owners do too, I think.
Absolutely. Yep.
And so, if that's the problem, then you need to figure out how to separate their sense of self-worth from,
Yep.
the idea that they truly can step away from time to time. And so getting into all of those things really helps you to find an appropriate solution. And I would say, in general, you should look at this kind of like technology. And I've overseen a lot of development teams. I ran a software company for a while. And one of the concepts that we have in technology is to address single points of failure.
Love it.
And so, what that effectively means is if you've got a website, you've got a backup version of the website that can be turned on instantaneously or near instantaneously, that you've got, a parallel version of your database running, and all of those key components, so that if something happens, you can continue to move on.
Love
And,
that.
and you need to do the same from a human resources perspective within the agency and identify what single points of failure do you have, whether it's yourself as the owner or one of your team members, and figure out how do you mitigate that. You're never going to eliminate it. You're never going to, even when we had backup servers running, they often were not as full powered as the main one
Sure.
because you couldn't afford it.
Yep.
That's fine. But you
Yep.
have to have some kind of a plan so that things don't just completely go off the rails. If someone calls in sick, if they have an accident, if they quit, if they want to take vacation, whatever it is.
Yeah. I think I learned this lesson when I had just started my agency, and there was a huge client project that we were working on and a big product launch. And we were pitching the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and USA Today for this story. And it was happening at the same time that I had a ski trip uh, booked. Now, I don't miss my ski. Like, you got to figure this out. So I was trying to figure out how to make it work so that I could go on my trip, but also none of these balls would be dropped. And I remember my phone rang while I was on the chairlift, and it was the reporter from the New York Times that we had been working with. And she explained, what she needed and what her deadline was and all that. And I was like, great. Well, give me half an hour and I'll get back to you. Get off the chairlift, skied down to the bottom of the mountain. I called the client. I said, this is what we need. I called the reporter back in 30 minutes, did everything that we needed to do, got back up and went skiing. Like, there are ways that you can do it and still be able to manage things. Today, it's a little bit different because now I have a media relations team that would handle that they wouldn't need me. But that's how I did it at the time because there were like 4 of us on the team at the time. And we were very, very small at the time. So you can figure out ways to make it work, especially in today's world where you don't have to be stuck at your desk. There are lots of ways that you can figure out how to build the business so that you can be absent for a little bit. If it's half a day or if it's a day, one of the things I like to see agency owners do is have one day a week where they're totally solely focused on the business. They're not doing meetings. They're not talking to clients. They're not doing internal meetings. There's no one-to-ones. It's all about them and what they're able to accomplish for the business. And if you get in that habit, people are already accustomed to not having you for a day. They're going to be okay for 4 more days as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think our teams are more resilient, our clients are more understanding,
Mhm.
and we
Yes.
and our individual team members are not nearly as critical
Right.
99% of the time that we think we are. And so, and what I always encourage is just start with those things. Start with one day off, right? Whether that's you or a
Yes.
team member.
Yes.
If you think it's just not possible, start with a day. And
Yep.
if you cannot go one day, you got, I mean,
Yeah.
we're talking fundamental existential
Yes.
problems that you need
Yes.
to address, because there is nobody who ought to be that vital that
Correct.
they cannot take a single day off. Now, I mean, there's obviously exceptions. If you pick the day that your client has their biggest launch, then that's what you were hired to support. Well, of
Right.
course you can't take that day off. So don't
Correct.
come to me and give me that
Yes.
example and say, well, of course I can't take. No, of course you can't take that day off. But most days, because, well, I mean, it's the pushback I get. Someone pulls out the most extreme possible example of when they can't take time. Well, yes, of course. Like, we got it. There are specific times that you cannot take off.
Yeah.
However, those are and should be extraordinarily limited.
Yeah.
And if they are not, then you need to figure out how you can make it so that you can take that time off, so that your team members can take that time off, because they are not the problem. You are not the problem. I mean, you are the problem, but you're not the problem in the way that you think you are.
Right.
And there are so many ways that you can address this, starting with convincing yourself that it's just not as big a deal as you think it is. It's like when someone makes a mistake, everybody's like, oh my God, the client's going to fire us. I cannot tell you how many mistakes I've made for clients over the years. I'm sorry to disappoint everybody, but I am not perfect. I've already said that before and gotten into trouble with
Jen, we've got another one.
Yeah, there you go. She can clip this one too.
You can clip this one for me too.
And send it to Ginny and my kids so that they can send it to me whenever they feel like it, which is so helpful. But it's reality. We all make mistakes.
We do.
And I have to tell you, I have never been fired by a client, knock on wood, for any mistake I have ever made.
Right. That's right.
And I've made some pretty good ones.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't really know of many cases where someone has made a mistake and their agency got fired.
Right.
I mean, are they out there? Of course. Of course there are examples. But usually it's not just a mistake. It's like a catastrophic mistake.
Right. Or the mistake is the tip of the iceberg and it's like, okay, enough is enough. That was like the last straw, but it's never usually the reason.
Yeah. I mean, even when you have the case of, an agency on behalf of a client posts something to their social media account that's completely inappropriate. I mean, oftentimes the employee does get fired off of that.
Yes.
But not even 100% of the time. Sometimes they just, get a solid scolding and a don't do that again kind of thing. But most of those circumstances that I'm aware of, at least, the agency itself didn't get fired.
That's right. Yep.
So you've got to be realistic about these things and understand that you're not as important as you think you are. Your team members are not as important as you think they are, or they may think they are. And so if you've got this kind of a problem, you just need to come up with a plan to solve it.
Yes. I think there's a couple of things happening in the world collectively overall right now that I think can help with this. One is people tend to have summer hours during the summer, which we're just hitting Memorial Day in the US, and that tends to be the start of summer hours. And I think that train, for us, we've the entire time I've had my agency, we've always closed Fridays at noon. And that's just what we've done between Memorial Day and Labor Day. It's great. Clients don't care because they're probably not working either. So that's not a big deal. So getting them used to that. But this trend toward the 4-day work week that's happening right now globally, I think is a really good example of that as well. One of the things that we've talked about internally, and we're not quite there yet, but we continue to discuss it and figure out a way, is the agency itself can't be closed a day a week. Like it can't be closed on Fridays or Mondays, because that just won't work. So what we're talking about is, we'll continue to stay open, but then we all rotate who has time off, because of course everybody wants a Friday or a Monday off. We can't do that. So we're rotating, 1 week you get Monday, next week you get Tuesday, and so on and so forth. So you're still getting a 4-day work week. In some cases you might have to work Monday, Tuesday, and then Thursday, Friday, which kind of sucks. But then the next week you get your turn. So we're trying to figure that out as well. But I think that also trains clients to understand that this is important to you and it's important to your culture. And it trains your team to say, okay, well, if I'm not here for a day, I'm the social media director and I'm not going to be here on Thursday. I need the team to be able to do the work versus hoarding it to myself. And although I'm pretty sure this person still would have said, oh, yeah, and pretended to take Thursday off, but still did the work. But I think in general, if you understand that that's what's going on, you help to coach them to be able to delegate and do the right kinds of things so that they're not micromanagers and they're not control freaks. And that goes for the owner ourselves, right? Those are things that we have to think about too. So there are things like that I think you can implement that will help you get over these hurdles because everybody is going to want that benefit. Everybody's going to want there was an unlimited PTO thing for a while that everybody wanted that benefit. So there are opportunities for you to sort of test this out and figure out how to craft that plan that you speak about to be able to manage this kind of stuff.
And I mean, there are so many things going on right now in terms of conversations around remote, hybrid, in
Yep.
office.
Yep.
Unlimited PTO is seeming to fall back out of favor after having really, risen for a number of years. So there's all sorts of these different, the 4-day work week, as you mentioned. A lot of these things are in the conversation. None of them take away the need to make sure that nobody is indispensable. Some of them may or may not make it easier or harder for addressing some of those things. But I think we all have to be ready for those conversations as well, which I guess is probably beyond the scope of what we can cover here today since we're starting to run out of time. But
Dang
but
it.
but I think we need to be thinking about and open to all of these things,
Yep.
and it needs to be part of a dialogue with our team. So if we feel that someone can't take the time off, we need to talk with them and say, hey, I feel like, if you take time off, we're in a bind. How do we solve that?
Mhm.
And we all need to remember, we've said this over and over again, as the owner, you don't have to solve all the problems yourself. If you
Right.
have team members, you should be tapping into them. And
Yes.
if you see a team member as, having this as a potential bottleneck, talk to them. They probably have some good ideas that may not be the same as yours, but may
Yep.
work even better.
Yep.
Maybe with a lot less effort than you think. And if you don't have those conversations, you'll never find them. And by having those conversations, not only will you find the solutions, but you're also demonstrating your respect of your team member because you value their opinion. And you're also demonstrating that you want to be a problem solver and not just someone who's heaping the problems on their shoulders and expecting them to deal with it.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice. I think that's advice that I could have used early in my agency life. So I hope that people heed that because they want to be that's a way that they feel valued and being able to help support the growth of the business is what pretty much every employee wants to be able to do. So when you entrust them with that kind of stuff and ask them for help in solving, it makes them feel more loyal and dedicated for sure.
Now, all that said, I'm going to remain a single point of failure on this podcast. And if I don't show up, we will not have a show that week. So
Dang it.
it is what it is.
Same
But
goes for me, actually,
yeah, that's true. That's true. Although I suppose I could put someone else in that chair, but you don't even have the login to do that. I guess Jen could give
That's
it to
true.
me. So
I
we
could
do.
get it. Yeah.
So there we
I could,
go.
yeah. Yeah.
So we're both sort of single points of failure, but by
Sort
choice
of.
because
Right.
we don't want to deal with having to have alternate co-hosts and all that kind of stuff. It's too much effort. Takes away all the fun too. Anyway, so that will draw to an end this episode of the Agency Leadership Podcast. I'm Chip Griffin.
And I'm Jenny Dietrich.
And it depends.